So why don't we kick it off, first of all, with some introductions. Let's start on the very far end. Yeah, that guy. Andy.
Hi, folks. I'm Andy Ellis, operating partner at YL Ventures. And I think my mic kicked in halfway through. So that was Andy Ellis at the start of it.
Roger Hale, Chief Security Officer at BigID.
I'm Sounil Yu. I'm the CISO at JupiterOne, and I am also the author of this book, which I'm happy to make available to you and sign copies of.
Yeah.
I'm Debbie Taylor Moore, and I am VP and Senior Partner for IBM Consulting.
My name's Jay Leek. I'm Managing Partner and Co-Founder of SYN Ventures and a proud owner with a signed book of from Sounil.
All right, let's kick it off with something more serious and talk about where are the areas of innovation that we're seeing now in the cybersecurity market. What's interesting? Not all of us.
So everything's interesting, right? But what's happening right now, from my perspective, is that what I'm hearing, what I'm talking to, and what I'm speaking to from boards to executive panels is they're measuring the level of increase in automation across domains in what we're doing. So what's interesting is the board, the executives are understanding that this isn't a challenge from I need more skilled people, but this is how do I build automation to up-level the people I have and bring them into those roles that actually allows me to retain that talent and grow that talent.
Great.
I think there's a limit to that automation, though, because there's easy ways to shoot yourself in the foot. And again, pointing out the matrix, there are limits to how much technology will solve our problem. And as we move further to the functions of respond and recover, we need more people to be able to do that well. And so that's really where the gap is. In the market today, it's not the technology, it's actually the people that we need.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but I also think that this has been a particular brutal year for our folks who are on the front line of cyber. And I think that, for the most part, those folks probably aren't appreciated for as much as they should be. I mean, it's been a real year of absolute burnout. But I also think it's been interesting in terms of the developers. So they went to school to be developers, to be data engineers, to be data scientists, to be architects, and not to be security people. But they are very much thrust in the role now, and it's totally changed everything in the way we think about security today.
Personally, I'd say we're in very much like a real rebuild cycle. This digital transformation, buzzwords, clouds, all this kind of stuff we could talk about. Everyone just kind of moved faster than they really should have. They had to. And now I know countless CISOs that are kind of rethinking what they just did over the past 24 months and realizing they got to redo it. And so while I feel like a lot of us believe that we've advanced 3 to 5 years, I think we've also taken a few steps backwards and going to be rebuilding in a lot of ways too, which is very interesting because the cracks will be shown at that point in time. That creates lots of opportunities for many people in this room and for Israeli cybersecurity companies as well.
Great. And before we go to the next question, I just realized I didn't even introduce myself. Oh. So, I'm Yoav Leitersdorf, the managing partner of YL Ventures. Let's talk a little bit about the recent market downturn. Certainly with the cybersecurity stocks, which shall not be named because then I'll be picked on for naming certain stocks. You look at the last 3 or 4 months, you'll see some of them have lost a third of their value. Just recently, they've had an uptick since current events have pushed them a little bit up higher. But how resilient is the cybersecurity market? Are we concerned about seeing those market caps shrink? How do we prepare for potentially a weaker financial, Wall Street environment, and also thinking about private companies? How can VCs help cybersecurity companies kind of weather any kind of storm that's coming our way? And I'll start with my friend on the left here, Jay Leek.
Yeah. So look. I mean, the private markets are going to lag the public markets kind of historically. and usually it wouldn't filter down, I think, for a number of quarters or maybe even a number of years. I think we're already seeing an impact in later stage valuations today. So, my view, and we invest in earlier stage, so we're probably less impacted in a way, at least out of the gate, where the seed rounds and the A rounds, the best companies are going to get funded. They're probably not going to get funded too much differently than they were previously, although I think the outliers might be less. But once you get to B, and particularly C, D, or later, we're seeing compression already since January 1st, as much as 40%. We're also seeing, for the first time in probably close to a decade, structure in deals that we hadn't seen before. And like real structures, like even one of my friends who does later stage investing, they just closed a deal with a hot company. If I told you the name, you know of it. And they even have a redemption right in it, which that's something that's kind of crazy. That's never happened in my investing career. But I know people have been around longer than I have. I've seen that. Whether that's here to stay, I don't know. But what's scary about it, if you ask me, is those who have been less valuation sensitive in the A rounds and the B rounds for the past number of years, and now they're going to raise the C rounds, and you had C rounds metrics of 2020 or 2021, and now they're like, no, we want C round metrics of 5 years ago. You might not be having the upfront that you're looking for, at least for the short term, if not for the foreseeable future.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think companies really have to work hard to differentiate. I think that the thought leadership piece is huge now. And I think there are some people in the marketplace who are really taking advantage of the CISO fatigue. I don't know if you guys get to see sort of like the major food fights that happen on LinkedIn, where CISOs don't want to talk to vendors like at all. And they really want people to help them. They are drowning. And I think that those companies that have really strong evangelists that come to the table and really understand how to solve the problem and really are more than just personalities, but really do have a deep understanding of the client piece. I think that's a big differentiator, and I think that there's still a lot that can happen good for those companies.
No, I actually agree with that. And even to take it a little bit step further is, what I see that we're seeing right now, and I've been doing this for maybe like a year and a half, so literally 35 years in this industry. And what's going on right now is that time to actually take a breath and step back and don't panic. Don't knee-jerk react in the process. Look to your leadership, look to what's important to you, reassess, because this is, it's a negative spike. But it has nothing to do with the value of actually what we're doing and what technology is doing in the cybersecurity community. And the growth that we're continuing to work on, having that ability to do that. And like you say, not the character that's Andy Ellis, but actually, no, I'm kidding. I love you, you know that. But beyond that, of actually having the thought leadership of, I'm an operating CISO and I understand the business opportunities, which everything we do today is a business opportunity, it's a business responsibility. And being one of those leaders that helps drive that forward so that we don't react, we don't feel like this is like, oh my God, I have to save my business. No, this is where we drive forward. This is the time to take that leadership role and actually show what we can do right now.
And as Jay said, right, Jay talked about being scared potentially about what's going on in the markets and in the world. And if you're feeling that in the security industry, recognize every industry feels that. And the job of the security industry is to help people feel less scared. So at the same time as there is worry because economic downturn, world events, there's more opportunity to help people deal with their risks and solve those problems. Like if we go back almost 15 years and look at the downturn around 2008, and we had, a set of cyber actors who were doing scary things, and it actually helped build part of the security market at that time. So I think that the move forward with confidence, but not overweening arrogance, is I think a strategy for many companies.
By the way, Jay's on my board, and he heard me say that in June, actually. We're not scared. We're not saying we're scared. I'm saying this is where we go.
Yeah, I mean, but the advice for the CEOs and founders and startups in the room, my opinion is like, the demand hasn't changed. The market can go down 30%, go down 50%, it could hopefully not more. The cybersecurity demand in a way goes up, but companies also are going to curtail spending. So all that means is you should curtail spending as well, proportionate with your growth. And if you're growing, then spend what you need to spend. If you're not, don't hope for it. You know, that's the. I think we've been more confident over the past 2 years to spend on hope than we are probably today.
That's great. I remind you guys to think of questions for the audience. Think of a good question to ask these great panelists. So let's talk a little bit about the role of the CISO, which, wow. Have you all been CISOs? All four of you? No,
I've
not
worked
so much.
with lots of them.
Work with lots of CISOs.
You're lucky.
I know. I feel lucky.
Andy's been a CSO for 25 years?
Just over 20 years.
Just over 20
21.
years.
Slow learner.
Yeah, it took me a long time to realize that was not a hard
The
job.
same company too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jay, even Jay, my VC friend here, has been a CISO.
Recovering
CISO from Blackstone. Let's talk about the role of the CISO. So security has obviously become more and more important, a real board level conversation. Yet a CISO is not yet considered C-suite, right? I mean, it's not, no. And so how do you feel How do you feel about the role of the CISO changing, especially in light of what's going on? And also, how does that impact the way startups should approach CISOs, sell to CISOs? What do you think?
So this one's timely since I actually have an op-ed going up very shortly about this topic. The challenge is the CISO isn't part of the C-suite, which I define as the people in the CEO's staff meeting. If you're not in that room of 10 people when decisions get made and then justified in the room of 50 people, you're not in the C-suite, despite the fact that we all had the C in front of our title.
It's a little C.
It's a little C. It's not a
It's
big
little
C. And the challenge that creates for CISOs is, first of all, they're not getting executive training. They're not learning how to operate with the CEO. At the same time, they have board members who start to care more and more about security. And so the board member is pushing on the CEO, who pushes down to the CISO, who now gets in between those two. And that's a dangerous place to be. And you see a lot of burnout happening in the CISO community by CISOs that don't know how to cope there. But at the same time, they are trying to up-level themselves and get out of being just another operator. And so that's an opportunity, which is if you are selling a product and your product is measuring effort, like counting how many vulnerabilities got patched last week, that is not something the CISO needs. That's something the Director of Vulnerability Management needs. The CISO needs to be able to measure how effective their program is, and if your tool doesn't help them do it, then you're not helping them be a CISO, you're helping them be a director.
I want to take that further, because it's not just telling you how well the security program is running, but how it actually enables the business itself. So cybersecurity risk is business risk, and if we can't articulate that, if we can't have our vendors help us articulate that well, then you're not really helping us communicate to the board and be part of that C-suite that you're referring to.
So this is where right now the executive teams, the board members, they need to step up a little bit more. What we're seeing right now more and more, and especially in the startup community, is who's going to be that CISO in that startup environment, and they're not looking at someone that actually has the experience or understands the entire scope and domains of a CISO. They're looking for a director of security. And so they're shooting us in the foot in this area, and we're shooting ourselves in the foot by allowing this to happen, instead of actually pushing forward and driving forward to learn the communication style. If we have to do it on our own, that's fine, but learn how to communicate, learn how to have that executive conversation, learn how to communicate business problems, what is important to the board, what is important to the executive staff, because the last thing you want to hear, and I've never heard this before, is, Roger, you're killing me with details. Tell me what we need to know, right? I've put my own foot in my mouth multiple times in this process, but we have to up-level that. We have to have the support of executive leadership for them to understand that the conversation we're having isn't about security. It's about moving the business forward. It's about the bottom line revenue for the company and protecting that revenue.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. I think that too often the CISO is seen, or the security department writ large is seen as obstructionist, and the business units, particularly during COVID, have harnessed extreme power. They go, they build their applications, they're thinking of the competitive business world and what they need to do to be on par with their competitors. And the CISO and his whole department are running behind the developers trying to figure out, like, oh, you built what? So we need to secure that. And they're diminishing in importance if they're not sitting at the table really understanding the business shifts and how the company maintains not only the crown jewels, but they maintain their competitiveness. So the CISO, I think, has to be more of a business person than what we've seen traditionally.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with everyone said, but I'm also gonna say that I do believe that the role of the CISO has been up-leveled massively in the past decade. I can say that 15-20% of our CISO board of advisors do sit in the ESTF meeting every week and do report to the CEO of a Fortune 500 company and are looked at as business leaders, not security officers, that happen to be smarter about security than everyone else in the room. So that probably wasn't a true statement in any form or fashion 5 years ago. So that's the exception today, but it's definitely a growing trend. And I think that for security officers, former recovering, whatever, people aspiring, but also for folks that are selling to security teams, like the security officer role, like has become a business leader role. If you don't see it that way, if you don't run your program as a business, you're not a CISO. You're a director of IT ops or whomever said that just now. But I think that's also important for the entrepreneurs in the room to realize the CISO in most big organizations doesn't make any decisions anymore about your product, your solution, or whatever. They have delegated that to people in their team. You're still trying to sell to the CISO, yet the decision maker is one or two levels down. The CISO can block it and is going to approve it, but they're not going to recommend it to their team. Why? Because if they recommend it to their team, that team member is going to say, oh, you can do my job better than me, I quit, because I can get 5 other jobs tomorrow where they're not telling me what to do. And so, you have to really think about, like, as you're marketing your solution into an organization security program, that you're actually targeting the right cohort, because we talk about the CISO, and that's just not the case anymore. Wasn't true 5 years ago so much, but definitely true today.
Definitely up-leveling. Up-leveling over the last 5 years has definitely happened. Absolutely.
That's great insight. You're not really selling to the CISO. You're selling to the CISO's team. And the CISO can block the sale, but the CISO is not going to try to make the decision. That's very insightful. So, Debbie, I have a question for you. From a buyer perspective, as you're buying security, what do you think is more appealing? Do you want to buy a bunch of point solutions, each one sort of best of breed? Or do you want to try to go for broader platforms where you might compromise a little bit on quality, or not being best of breed, but at least you get one vendor or just a few vendors? What do you prefer?
I think my strategy is going to be to look at both. I mean, there's some value in the platform providers, but if they're the only people giving you advice about security, and if you don't have early stage or emerging tech talking to you about what's coming and what's new, you'll get left behind. So you need to really, I think you need to pay attention to both. And it's sort of a balance. But I also think that, it's difficult for CISOs. They can't have a million meetings. I've talked to so many who just say, I've stopped seeing vendors, and, I try to, think of ways that I can keep up with technology without seeing the vendors. And that's kind of major. I think that there's so many solutions within the ecosystem that you really, in order to stand out, you've got to be a little bit more creative than, calling and emailing 1,000 times, because that's just noise to a CISO. But on your portfolio question, I think that the point solution piece is changing. I think that people are less reactive and buying a solution after the fact, after a breach that's very highly publicized, and trying to solve one problem. Everybody has a Noah's Ark of solutions. So it's really more along the how are you enforcing security from a policy perspective? And how are the people managing and working with the security tools that you own? Because a lot of times there's overlap and you have what you need.
Can I double tap into that just a little bit? There's some things that you said that I totally like. I want to put my soapbox up, right? And the one thing is really easy is like, I got an outreach the other day. I'm like, look, Sounil Yu is a friend of mine. If I need you, I will reach out to you, right? Because that's how you talk to the CISOs, through trusted relationships.
Yeah,
but the other side of that is whether it's platform, whether it's point solution, and you may have requirements for both, but I think that as CISOs, we understand that it's an 80-20 rule, so we're gonna lean towards that platform first.
Yeah.
However, in that process, I'm not buying what you have today. Okay? I'm buying your roadmap. I'm buying what you can do for me because I have a 3-year investment. I don't care if it's subscription based. I have a 3-year investment in anything I bring in-house. Anything that you can do in your roadmap over those 3 years, as well as how do you enrich what I have in my security stack today, these are the things that I want to talk about. Yeah.
And I think it's really important to understand the difference between a platform and a package. Right? There's a lot of people who will come in and say, well, look, I've got like 20 solutions that are integrated, but none of them are best of breed, and they don't work as a single platform. And that's not a platform. Platform is I have one solution that solves a bunch of problems, everything's tightly integrated, and that was, I think, a bigger selling point maybe 10, 15 years ago when no solutions had good APIs, and there was no easy way to integrate things together. Now I can put together a couple of different detection platforms, connect them together through an XDR or whatever we're calling that market these days. I think the XDR buzzword's going away, we'll see. But connect them with good APIs, and that integration cost is no longer ruinous, which it was 10 years ago. If I bought 2 solutions that were incompatible, I spent engineers trying to make them work together. That's less true. So I think people are doing a blended approach. They want some platform to tie everything together. They will enjoy features it has, but they are still going to patch in targeted, focused solutions around that.
Exactly. I think, too, that there's an issue out there with folks feeling like there is really sort of no way to decommission what they own. I think one of the golden solutions would be sort of like what's in Sounil's book about how you really sort of figure out what your coverage is and figure out what you need to keep and what's overlap and what's not doing it for you anymore, because no one decommissions anything. And it's an ROI question because there's always better approaches.
No, on the vendor creep, so this isn't my statistics. So I was just doing an interview a couple weeks ago with Bob Bragdon from CISO Online. And it was interesting. They just did a study across their readership. So let's call it Global 2000 mostly, Fortune 500 included in that. And they said for every 5 vendors a organization retires, they're adding 6 every year, year on year. So, we did a study 2015 through one of my companies, and we said Fortune 500 companies on average have 55 unique vendors. We did it again in 2018. We said 75. Today, I'm sure it's over 100. We have people on our board of advisors over 200. It's creeping, but that's as you're consolidating things and also in combining things as well. So, there's definitely a vendor creep happening. I don't think mega platforms are conquering the world by any means. I think there's a place for that as well. But we haven't gotten our hands around how to, get that vendor creep under control, and I don't think there will be. I mean, otherwise, we're going to see a downturn as opposed to in the past 20 years there were 1,200 to 5,000 to 6,000 security companies, and that's going that direction, and that's not sustainable. You think, but I said it wasn't sustainable 5 years ago when there's 3,000 either.
Yeah, very, very interesting.
Yoav, can I answer this?
Yeah.
I think so I had this problem a lot at Bank of America. Let me just be clear in terms of where point solutions are better than the integrated solutions. If you have a new threat vector, point solution is going to win every time. But as that threat vector matures and as people figure out how to handle it, the well-integrated solution is going to win all the time. It's a matter of timing. So if you are out to market with a point solution that solves a pain point that everyone is feeling right now, or maybe not everyone, but just if there are people who feel it right now and there are no other solutions, get that point solution out there as quickly as possible. You'll make a lot of money. But if you're late to the game, you better come with an integrated solution.
In other words, as soon as the new threat vector or new point solution becomes mainstream, Nikesh Arora buys you for Palo Alto Networks and you become part of that platform.
Wow. Wow.
I'm trying to make this panel interesting.
By the way, no gratuitous plug for a fully open API platform. No gratuitous plug for that whatsoever.
Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about some topics that are really kind of front and center, and try to be serious about this one. We have a major war going on, actually not that far away from here, in relatively global terms. Russia, Ukraine. We know that Russia has been a very successful state actor on the cyber crime, cyber offense area. There's also a lot of ransomware attacks coming out of Russia, and we've just seen the sort of the beginning of a major wave of attacks out of Russia. And we know that they're financing a lot of their activities using ransomware. And I'd love to get some thoughts from the panel on what's going on.
I'm actually surprised that it's not as worse as we thought it would be. I mean, we are definitely concerned. Shields up, everything that's associated with just being prepared. But the disaster scenario that we had predicted has not unfolded. Now, there's a degree to which maybe it's because we said, hey, we need to be prepared, and that's why we're not seeing as much activity as we think we might. But I'm actually surprised that we haven't seen it as bad as it could potentially be.
I was just going to say, I think it's an issue of proximity. I mean, if you're Poland and you've opened your borders for arms and materials, and you're experiencing kind of several bad days at the hands of the Russians. So I think that, I guess from where things are today, we can say that we haven't seen anything yet.
So can I change the conversation just a little bit? Okay. This is back to the point that we made earlier around the CISO has to be a business leader and has to address a business problem. Because what we're seeing in ransomware attacks is not ransomware. They're not looking for money. They're actually trying to shut down the Department of Defense so that they can shut down communications. They're leveraging ransomware the way you'd leverage a DDoS attack. So they've shifted the actual tooling to their goals. And this is where being a business leader comes in on this. At the same point in time, there's multiple people in this room, there's multiple international companies that actually have resources in the Ukraine. And that's a part of your business continuity planning. And it falls into that same area of pandemic planning that we all got caught without anything 2 years ago. I mean, I remember at a company that I'm no longer at, I won't say whom, where they said there's no way we're going to talk about pandemic planning because that's ridiculous, there's other things more important. And guess what just happened 2 years ago, right? So now we have the same thing with the Ukraine and Russia in this area. This is business continuity. This is where our customers are coming to us, our investors are coming to us and asking us multiple questions. One is about ransomware. How are you addressing the fact that you have resources, and please document the resources you have in the Ukraine? And then the other one that comes back as well, and this is why this is a business conversation, is please confirm that you're actually complying with all the new sanctions that are coming out so that you're operating in a legal manner within the countries that you operate in. This is truly up-leveling this role, and this is another opportunity for us to lead from the front in what we're doing, but understanding that the technical component of this is just that one piece, but considering the impact of the attacks that are going on, who they're accessing, who they're attacking, because it's not just Ukraine. It's anyone that has resources in the Ukraine, they're leveraging that because it's part of their excuse to attack you as well. And so this is a global problem we have today.
So I think we're seeing a big change here that's very similar to DDoS. But before I go into that, I just want to point out, as a Ukrainian-descended Jew myself, the example that Zelensky is setting is one which I regret, because I will never live up to this man. And I'm going to hear about it for the rest of my life.
Amen.
So true.
But when you think about what happened with DDoS when Operation Babel started, so for those short history lesson, DDoS used to be mostly the gaming industry attacking each other. Sometimes they'd extort other businesses. Anonymous got involved, would do DDoS attacks. But companies mostly ignored the problem of DDoS until Operation Babel, which was when Syria got involved in the game and started doing DDoS attacks, which was a nation state with a systemic campaign.
Iran.
Sorry, it was Iran. My bad. It's been so long. Iran was involved doing the campaign, and companies had to take it seriously, and they couldn't think about paying any form of extortion because you would be giving money to a foreign country that was engaged in terrorist activity. And I think we're at that same inflection point here that ransomware, companies got to say, well, I guess I'll pay the ransom from time to time. You can't now. If you're a US-based company, you will commit a crime by paying the ransom. So you now must deal with ransomware. And if the Russians persist in a ongoing campaign of ransomware as a DDoS tool, you now have to deal with it. You can't say, well, it's a business risk that someday I'll have to pay a ransom. No, it's now a business risk that someday you're out of luck, so you better deal with it now.
One more topic I want to bring up, and then let's see if there are any questions from the audience. And if not, I do have more questions. So, Log4j, heard of it? Log4Shell?
Never been happier to not be a CISO in Log4j.
Woohoo! That was so last year.
No, it's not. It's ongoing. And I'll tell you, it's overwhelming people still. I mean, it absolutely is. I think there's a real challenge with nested dependencies. And we're really realizing just how a 1990s flaw can just come back from the past and haunt all of us for the next 2 or 3 years. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal what people are experiencing. And so those solutions that illuminate the third-party dependencies, or some folks are calling this SBOM capability, are really important to organizations today.
And it's not just third party. This is third, fourth, and fifth party
Exactly.
challenges. Because
Exactly.
we handle our stuff, right? I have to say that because my board member's on this panel. We handle our stuff, right? However, we have dependencies. Everyone has dependencies on their vendors, their code vendors as well. And then they have their dependencies on their code vendors as well. So you're tracking 3, 4 levels deep to how do you address this? How do you communicate? How do you give your customers the transparency and assurance that you're attacking this correctly and that you're driving to a solution that's going to give them the assurance to continue to use your product?
Exactly.
So my view is that Log4j is not a problem to be solved, but a predicament to be managed. So we have a huge dependency on things like Log4j, but if we look at those things as I can just fix this problem, then we're actually missing the broader the point that we have to deal with, which is we have this huge supply chain dependency on things like Log4j, and that introduces a significant amount of risk that we have to manage with the expectation that at any point in time, one of these things might go bad. So what Log4j has really highlighted for us and for the community at writ large is to approach this as a risk that we have to manage on our side, not expect fixes on the other side. You should plan for Log4j to be continuously, perpetually compromised. How would you design your environment if you're forced to have to use Log4j? And that means, for example, design systems so that you have good egress filtering. So it doesn't matter if Log4j gets compromised. It doesn't matter if SolarWinds gets compromised. They can't communicate out because you've filtered that traffic away, right? So if you manage the risk on your end, it gives you actually lots of freedom and not have to worry so much about something else in your supply chain getting popped as a result.
And I think comparing Log4j and SolarWinds is really apt because CISOs are doing the exact same thing after both of them, which was chase the specific problem. And everybody after SolarWinds was chasing it. And I think it was actually at one of our panels I said, I'm not worried about SolarWinds now, I'm worried about one of their competitors. Because everybody's chasing down, is SolarWinds in my supply chain? And what happened like 2 months later? Revil goes after Kaseya. And Kaseya was a SolarWinds competitor. I'm not worried about Log4j tomorrow, but what else is in your code base that, let's be honest, you've never heard of? Because almost no one in this room had heard the phrase Log4j before December. Like one of the most ubiquitous pieces of software on the planet, and no CISO really knew what it was.
Very interesting. So let me ask, are there any questions in the audience? There's a few.
A lot of you have served as CISOs, now with VCs or with vendors as well. For the startups, and the CISOs in the room have probably got 1 million messages in their inbox and their LinkedIn about, hey, come and talk to me, talk to me, talk to me. How do the startups get your attention with that messaging? How is it best to try and position themselves to just get an audience with the CISO in the first instance, given the fact that you are inundated with solicitation all day, every day?
They don't. Okay? We actually addressed this a little bit earlier because I have over 1,800 emails that I have not even looked at in my mailbox today. Okay? The conversations that we have are trusted conversations, but we're not making the decisions anymore. Even if we're at a startup, right? We don't make that decision by ourselves. Our teams, the individuals who want to be CISOs, the individual who wants 1,800 unread emails in their mailbox, those are the individuals that you need to look at, you need to target, because those are the ones that I rely upon to tell me what actually works and what doesn't. Because you're not going to get my attention. The only way you're going to get my attention is if someone from my board or my CEO comes in and says, hey, will you talk to this person? And I've got an amazing quote from a director of security at a very large global financial institution that says, I will take the meeting if my CEO or if my board asks me to, and I will never speak to you again.
Hey, Roger, we should have a conversation about you reading your emails. That's a different
Jay, you text me. You don't send me emails.
All right, another question
that
here.
was-
Actually,
was
I'll on
very
the record say that. When I was a CISO, if you got introduced to me by somebody on the board or the CEO, unless you were perfect, you never got spoken to again. Like that is like the death knell, is to force me to take a meeting, often from somebody who's like, they think they're just doing a courtesy. They're like, oh yeah, I can do this intro, but it comes with so much weight behind it that will kill you inside a security team.
That's so discouraging. It really is. I mean, you have emerging tech and you want to have the conversations that get you in front of the people who are going to really be life changers for you because they are the kingmakers. And I would say that one of the best approaches is really to, if you have some good past performance with another CISO, you have that CISO talk to the CISO you're trying to talk to. And make sure that you have a really solid case study or something to put in front of them that's very similar in their vertical, or something that is, even if you understand their environment, don't come slinging a product, but come with a real understanding of the hurt and what they're experiencing. But I would use an opportunity to have another CISO influence the CISO I want to have a conversation with.
But whatever you do, do not send me an email that says, we're helping CISOs in these companies and in this problem solving, and I know that I can help you too. But you don't know me.
Well, you can't go in the office and, now that we're visiting people in offices and say, that's a great picture of your family, or did you go on vacation there, or any of the things that people do when they come in and they're trying to build rapport. It's extremely hard to build rapport if you're in any level of business development. But I think that a real case study that aligns with what you maybe have challenges with is important, because I think also that people have to look straight through. So not just the solution, or not just the upfront piece of it, but full circle around ROI, around outcomes, around the ongoing maintenance and management of whatever solution is going on and how this integrates into the environment. You have to know where you fit.
All right, so let's put a practical plug on what Debbie and Roger said, because I can totally agree on this. But how do you do that? That's easy said, right? So everyone has design partners, and everyone in Israel has Israeli design partners. I'm sorry, when I was a CISO of Blackstone, I didn't know your Israeli design partner CISOs, unless it was the guy who bought one of everyone in the room. So what you need to find is you need to find great investors, like my buddy here, that has great relationships in the United States, and also get some US design partners, some European design partners. And it's really important that you pick a handful of design partners from well-known CISOs that don't buy everything. They're solving a real problem. They deploy it and use it in production, and then CISOs buy from CISOs. All right. I can tell you countless stories of $1 million POs that got done with no POV because this person trusted that person, that they solved a real problem. It's going to be a pain in the ass to POV. I trust him, I trust his team or her team or whatever. I know they do quality work. I relate to the problem. You know what? I'm going to take a risk and I'm going to buy it, right? And those are a holy grail. It's hard to do that. It doesn't happen that often on the $1 million side. I guarantee you it happens all the time with discretionary spends of like $50,000 or $100,000 though.
Yeah, it is a trusted relationship that's really important. But I also think that when you're looking at your solution and you're thinking about some level of POV or some sort of pilot and sort of having a real sense of how, whether your technology, you're coming in there, this needs to be something that is very easily demonstrated. It needs to be very quickly demonstrated. And the criteria for the POV needs to be something that matters. Like it can't be something you just choose randomly. It has to really fit the environment of the person you're talking to. But these POVs that happen in 2 weeks, I think there are a couple of companies here in the Israeli community that are outstanding at this particularly, and have solutions that allow them to connect via API and actually run what they need to there and show the customer some sort of reporting very early on. Nobody has time for a 4-month POV. It's really got to be, or POC, or proof of value is what I mean when I say POV. No, like 4 months, like nobody's paying attention to you in 4 months.
Yeah, and we're gonna hurry up a little bit, I think, because you have to make a flight, right, tonight. You do. So we'll take 2 questions, okay?
Well,
We'll take one here,
Yoav,
and then we'll take one over there.
I'll answer that question real quick. I will take a meeting if you map your product to the cyber defense matrix.
Woohoo! You heard it. Sounil says he'll take the meeting,
He will take the meeting.
but he mentioned the book.
Take the meeting.
I'm pretty sure these guys will too.
So my question is this. We talked a little bit about the evolution of the CISO and where we're at today, right? What's next, right? The role's not going to stay, even as they become more of a business leader, the role is going to have to evolve more. What's the next evolution of the CISO role?
So my view on that is that I look at the CISO today as a veterinarian. We have a lot of pets that we have to take care of. The future is cattle. So if you consider how even the startups today are building their solutions, they're building in the cloud. They're building on very ephemeral, very distributed, very immutable infrastructure. That is all cattle. I think the role of the CISO changes from being a veterinarian to being a chief pet control officer.
Speaking as an Idaho rancher, I grew up as an Idaho farm boy with dairy and ranch. I can kind of relate to that, but to bring that around full circle, everything we're doing right now, and even this conversation is tied back to the fact that we're technologists, but we're not techies anymore. Okay? We have techies working for us, but we're technologists. We're looking at the business case and what we're doing. I think the evolution, and I'm sorry I invited you here tonight, is that we are addressing risk and enablement of the business. Okay? the growth in this area truly goes beyond what used to be a chief risk officer from a financial risk perspective, that now we're really talking about business risk. And the person who actually knows how to operationalize that is the CISO. The person who understands how to implement and enable the product, to enable business development, because I can tell you right now from the previous question, I train my company's BR teams, the SDRs, on how to speak to a CISO and to actually tell them to stop talking to CISOs and talk to the Director of Security Engineering.
So, hey, Larry. So the evolution of a CISO is you've done your career, you've done it 3 or 4 times, you're in a Fortune 500 company, you're going to retire, right? Not retire, but you're going to go into the next evolution of your career to not be a CISO anymore. And when the CEO hears that, he's like, I would like for you to go run that business for me, and it might not be a security business. That's the holy grail, right? Now, I'm not saying people are there. We happen to have a friend of ours, Patrick, and I'm looking at him, that he's facing that right now. It's $1 billion annual turnover business. And he'll have the opportunity to go do that. He'll probably turn it down to do something bigger. That's the holy grail.
I think it's too early for us to actually predict. I mean, the CISOs are still running around like Pikachu. We're slowly evolving into Pichu, and you're asking us, what is Raichu? Like, this is a hard question. You know, for some of us, it's, hey, we'll go into the VC world. We'll go do startups. I stumped the folks who have no idea what I'm talking
We'll
about.
write a book.
I can't even drink to that.
You can't even
I
drink
don't even
to
know
that.
what to do with that.
So, but I think, you know, Jay's given you one path forward. There's a path where the CISO becomes much like the general counsel, which is just a staff position that focuses on a narrow part of risk. Maybe it merges with the CIO, because I think the CIO is a doomed position, because as every company has become a technology company, why do you have a redundant position to focus on computers? Right? Maybe those merge. Maybe they merge into a chief product officer. You become part of the product team. Maybe it's the CTO. I think right now we're still waiting for the CISO to evolve into a C-level position and not just be the exception.
Guys, we'll take one more question and really quick because I feel bad if not. So go ahead.
It's quick. It's about Sunil's great book, especially about the table at the start at chapter 7. Shouldn't bug bounties be mentioned when talking about discovery?
So he's asking whether bug bounties should be considered part of discovery. And I'll jump in and channel Katie Musouris, who's probably the expert on bug bounties. And if you are relying on bug bounties for discovery, you do not have a mature discovery program. Bug bounties are a verification step on your discovery program, but you should have a robust discovery program internally before you consider a bug bounty.
So the difference between compliance and true security.
Audit and security, yes.
Well, that's compliance. Yeah.
If you would like to answer differently.
So this discovery of vulnerabilities or the enumeration of vulnerabilities is an identify function.
And one thing that's important about the enumeration of vulnerabilities is I really believe that, and I don't know if it was Wiz that came up with this sort of movement around...
Orca.
Or is it Orca? Okay, it's
Orca.
Definitely Orca.
Okay, so maybe Orca.
In
But
my other
this-
hat, I'm the advisory CISO for Orca, so Orca.
Okay, Orca. So this idea of a vulnerability database for cloud providers, cloud service providers, I think that this whole thing around shared responsibility, I love what Google has come up with in terms of shared fate, because it really is a whole of community type of thing, even if you're talking about infrastructure. And there's really no way for people to really manage, change, or impact the infrastructure from a cloud perspective, but there are vulnerabilities that are there, whether they're admitted to or not. However, but I think that that's an important piece of the entire puzzle. People need to have more information there than what we have today. It is shared fate.
Transparency of information.
So transparency, on that topic, SBOM for the win.
I was going to avoid that.
SBOM, please.
All right, 1 minute on SBOM. We'll start with Andy and then Sounil.
Okay. SBOM is a itemization of every piece of software in your estate. SBOM is very important for internal use. If you are responsible for deploying or building software, you should know every piece of software you are deploying or building. SBOM as a platform, a SaaS vendor, is an awful idea because your customers will be heavily opinionated about the design choices you made based on what software you are telling them. You will list OpenSSL, and they'll be like, why didn't you use S to N?
So Andy is looking at SBOM from a security standpoint. I'm looking at it from a safety standpoint. Do we or do we not want more transparency when it comes to safety? And the answer is yes. We as consumers want more transparency because it helps us make us more safe, okay? And if we look at it from a safety standpoint, I think it's far more compelling for us to say we should be demanding ingredient labels. We should be demanding a sense of what is in our software because it helps us make us more safe. Along the way, it may help us make us more secure. But to make an argument that we should drop the SBOM actually, I think, undermines our ability to remain more safe.
Okay,
So thank you very much.
I'm the only one here who is actually qualified to drop the SBOM. So,
oh, well, hold on. Wait, no. I'm qualified to drop the SBOM because I actually did drop an SBOM publicly. Thank you very much.
We have internal. We have make you more safe. Let me put it into revenue in dollars. Today, the Fortune 500 is requiring you to deliver an SBOM with your product if you're going to sell them your product. This is now the norm. Beyond anything else, yes, it does that. Yes, it does that. This is the cost of doing business. This is something that you need to be able to enumerate. This is where you need to be able to understand exactly where your open source is coming from, any kind of licensing that ties together, because if you cannot do this, they're not going to buy.
It's true, but the
That's a
one problem with SBOM is that, okay, so you identify your third parties and you have, full visibility and you've identified them correctly. So now what? So what can you do about where they sit?
I'd like to. You want to say something?
I was just going to say we're going to meet out in the parking lot in the Octagon cage
At the parking
later.
lot,
yeah,
roll up
yeah.
Please help me in thanking our panelists, Andy, Roger, Sounil, Debbie, and Jay. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having us. It was fun.